trying to turn off the air conditioning so that you can hear me. To begin with, let's recall how you spell perfection. It's spelled P-A-R-A-L-Y-S-I-S. Of course, that's a Winston Churchill quote. Perfection is spelled paralysis. Or, in other words, in the words of the American graphic designer James Victore, I think that's how you pronounce his name, feck perfection. So you can probably guess we're going to talk about perfect competition. And I think it's worth thinking about that idea of perfection, and that perfection is usually something that's unattainable, right? Perfection is something that is abstract, that we can think about in models, those models that help us understand real life, which is often imperfect, right? There's not actually that many examples of perfection in the world, and so we come up with models to have a grasp of it, though, right? So like there's no such thing as perfect beauty unless you look at the Virgin Mary, right? A supermodel is as close as we get, but that's a model. They're not perfect, they're airbrushed, right? They use things like Adobe to help us understand this, at least this taste of perfection. And of course, the models in economics are not supermodels, present company excluded, obviously, but even I'm not perfect if you were to examine my hairline. But our models are merely simplifications of reality. So let's take a look at the perfect competition model and hope that it helps us understand what maybe not a truly perfect competitive firm would operate in real life as, but at least a hyper competitive firm. You know, if you were to think of like hyper competitive firms or firms that approach perfect competition, we might think of like carrot farmers. We might think of graphic designers. We might think of Forex traders. I think all those kind of come close to attaining this model of perfection, this model of a perfectly competitive market. So first thing to remember about perfect competition is that because there's no barriers of entry, because information's free, because there's many buyers and sellers, prices get pushed down. In fact, they get pushed down to the point where supply equals demand. So we can draw that on our market model. There is a supply and demand curve, right? There is the standard traditional model. But when we look at an individual firm, we have to remember that they're taking the price from the market. So we can actually, put in our equilibrium price right there, but we're going to drag it all the way across into this. I hope that's straight. I think it's imperfect. Okay. We're going to drag it over like that and make sure. Yeah, it's not even straight. That's not good. Okay. There's a difference between being a perfectionist and then being an imperfectionist. I don't know if I want to be an imperfectionist. So let's try to do that again. And hopefully, one way that you do it is you keep it straight, but you start in the middle and then go left. But I don't know if I can do that. Okay, that's tolerable. And I don't really like that being on a dash line. Oh, now that line's undashed. This is really imperfect so far. I think I'm going to call this imperfect competition. Anyway, what we need to know is that this is, again, our P, right? So it's the same P, it's P star. But it's also equal to the marginal revenue for the firm, and it's equal to the average revenue, and it's equal to the demand. Or, again, people say like Mr. DARP, if you want to remember it that way. But just know that it's the price, right? So the price of a carrot is also the same thing as the marginal revenue for a carrot. So if you increase your input, you're going to get an increase in output of $1 worth of carrot. Or if you were to take the total revenue, let's say it's 100 carrots times $1, and you divide it by 100 carrots, you're going to get the average revenue, $1, and the demand, right? People are only willing to pay $1 since that's the market price, right? So it's all the same thing here, okay? Unlike in the monopoly where the marginal revenue is different from the average revenue, right? Because it's at a steeper slope. Okay, anyway. Second thing we need to look at is our marginal cost curve. So we need to include a marginal cost curve just like this, like a Nike swoosh, if I can do that. There we go, okay. And let's turn that inverse, great. And then let's put in marginal cost here to label it. Oops, always be labeling. ABL, always be labeling, okay? And Then here's the thing. So where does a firm maximize their profit? It doesn't have to be perfectly competitive. Could be a monopoly, could be oligopoly, natural monopoly, monopolistically competitive firm, any type of firm. All firms maximize profit. Not where total revenue equals total cost. No, because then they'd make nothing, right? They also don't maximize profit where average revenue equals average cost. They maximize profit where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, okay? And I'm going to just put that in here, right? So it's where this line, marginal revenue, equals this line, marginal cost, and that's right there, okay? And so I'm going to drag this down, try to keep it, somewhat perfect. Let's see if I can fix this. Oh, now I'm really hooped. Dash line, 10. Ooh, that doesn't look good. Huh. I really flipped it up. It was so good before I started. Now this is becoming very imperfect. Let's make that 5. Okay, that looks okay. Anyway. Might have to redo this. Nah, I think it's okay. Let's embrace imperfection. Wabi-sabi, as the Japanese call it. Okay, so we've got P star and Q star, and we know that $1 times 100 carats gives us $100 worth of carats, right? And that is our total revenue, right? So we can also do that as length times width, P star times Q star. I'm going to take this rectangle, and I'm going to just color it in right here. We're going to put it in, I don't know, like a green for revenue. Send it to the back, and voila, we've got our total revenue box. Now remember, because this is a perfectly competitive firm, we also have to factor in the fact that there are total costs, or there are average costs. So let's put that in. We need to also include our average cost curve. And let me see if I can do this correctly. Not perfectly, but I don't know. Excellently? Okay. My jokes aren't excellent. Okay, and then we'll label that as average cost. Okay. So, now, one thing I want to just go over with this. The average cost curve has to intersect the marginal cost curve at its minimum point. And the intuition behind this is think of the marginal cost curve as like your quiz score and the average cost curve as your GPA, right? So when you have when you start the year, maybe, the teacher's really generous and they give everybody 100% to start, but then like you really flub your first quiz, right? So that starts to bring down the average, right? And then you're like, oh, geez, I better start paying attention. And then you study and, the second quiz, you did better than the first, but you're really struggling. It still brings down your average. And then finally, at your third quiz, it's like, okay, finally, I'm better than my average. Half the semester's over, but whatever. That starts to bring up your average. And then you're like, I need to get that A. I need to get 100% on my last quiz. And that, it brings up your average slightly. It wouldn't make sense for the average cost curve to be over here for the same intuitive reason, in that if that were to happen, right, if let's say we drug it directly underneath, my quiz score is going up, but my average, my GPA is falling, right? That doesn't make sense. That's like my additional cost, that the cost of one additional unit is going up, but my average cost is going down. That doesn't make intuitive sense, okay? So that's why it should always look like that, right? The average cost curve should always intersect at its minimum, okay? All right, now the next thing is, well, what's our total cost and what is our profit? Well, in order to find out our profit, we need to figure out our total cost. I think we established last time I'm going to use orange to show the total cost. Remember, the formula for average cost is total cost times, it's total cost divided by quantity. What am I trying to do? I want to show my total cost, which is equal to my average cost times my quantity. Well, I don't see average cost, right? Where's average cost? Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? It's going to be where along Q star, where it hits the average cost curve. So it's basically going to be right there, right? So let's do that. Let's do this again, and maybe put in, a little average cost box, and we're going to just drag it up until it hits the average cost, which is right there, okay? And we'll send this to the back, okay? And so The important thing to note about perfect competition is that there's no profit left over, right? There's zero economic profit. Now, I can go into the fact that there's normal profit, right? You at least cover your opportunity cost. So we'll go into that in another video. But it's not like it's not like in a perfectly competitive market, like in a forex shop or for a graphic designer, they're not making any profit. They are making a normal profit, or it's basically their opportunity cost. It's like the next best thing that they could do, but they're not making anything beyond that. So the key lesson is that in a perfectly competitive market, your profits get wiped away. So when you're thinking about a job, you're thinking about a career, you should probably try to think of something, that not everybody else can do, right? You want to develop a skill so that you've got some monopolistic ability to set your prices above marginal cost. Anyway, that's what the perfectly competitive model should look like. So if you're an AP student or a A-level student, you got to know this stuff, right? IB, IGCC, don't worry, you don't need to know this. Not in this level of detail. You just need to know the concept, but you don't need to know the graph if you're in IGCC. But for the rest of you, you got to know this. Okay, bye.